Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Best Show Ever podcast where we talk about the best concerts that people have ever seen in their lives. I'm your host, Cam Herdt. Really cool episode this week, amongst a bunch of cool episodes this week. We have got 3 new episodes out right now that are fantastic. I know everyone's got a lot to listen to with Goose at the cap right now, but I'm saying we've got some really cool podcast episodes as well. If you're listening to this one, thank you so much. I appreciate your dedication, even while Goose is out there ripping it up. This is a really cool interview today with gunslinging guitarist Daniel Donato of Daniel Donato's Cosmic Country. Daniel sent me a really nice message a while ago, just saying, "Hey, I think your podcast is great," and I really enjoyed that because I'm a huge fan of his, and so absolute no-brainer to have on the podcast this season. One of my first people I wrote down. And this is a really cool conversation. He's got a big old brain. Let me tell you what. We sat down for this interview. I remember at it was like 7 a.m. my time. And in the first 10 seconds of this interview, he's already clicking on a level that I'm like, okay, let me have a little coffee and catch up with you here. This guy he's really operating on a very cool wavelength. And he thinks about art and he thinks about what he does in a very cool way. And so this is a fantastic insight into his creative process, and also just his journey that has led him to where he's at right now, which is touring the country with a fantastic band, and really putting out some great shows. I can't wait for you guys to listen to this episode. First, I do want to give some shout outs. Just first of all, I talk about Goose a little bit in this episode. It's very at the end. It's very much it's Goosemas. It's very much at the end of the podcast here. But I want to shout out a couple people who are doing funny stuff within the Goose community, since we're back on that train, since they're back playing again. One of those guys being Meme Havan. Meme Havan is one of the dudes who first started sharing my stuff. He's a San Diego boy, so we've seen some shows together. We saw Billy Strings together last year. He's so funny and his account is hilarious. It's a lot of Goose stuff, but he fits in some Fish stuff and some King Giz stuff, and even just some general funny. You find some good dog videos on that page, which we all need. Good cat videos from time to time, if I remember. He surfs. Dude's cool. Follow Meme Havan. It's spelled like meme and Havan. So you'll find him out there. Goose guy for sure. And then another great Goose guy that I wanted to shout out is Blotter Ellis. This is a newer account that I got to be honest, I haven't met this dude. I don't even know who he is. I just love this account. He's also doing a bunch of great Goose stuff, especially on the heels of the announcement of the new drummer Cotter Ellis. Follow Blotter Ellis on Instagram for some very funny Goose content. Daniel and I talk a little bit about who we think the next drummer is going to be, because I do this interview so long ago. And so kind of funny to like, oh, what do we think is going to happen when we all fully know that Cotter Ellis is currently playing his first shows with Goose at the Cap Theater this weekend, and early this week. But enough about Goose and enough about all that stuff. We're talking about Daniel Donato and Daniel Donato's Cosmic Country. So I'm going to get out of the way in this intro here. Please sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation that I had with Daniel. First, here's a little bit of music from a band called Loom with their song, What I Mean. The last time I recorded with someone, we talked for an hour and a half, went over, had an incredible conversation, didn't hit record. And so
Yeah.
It was just us hanging out and we didn't do the episode. So,
well, that's all it ever is. That's, there's a certain frequency that happens when you're not thinking and you're just doing. And, there's a whole circuit for play that's discoverable on the brains of mammals. And like the ones with humans is It's kind of it approximates other mammals as well, but like electrically, the brain is behaving different when you're playing, and playing is really just feeling safe within time, and you're just allowing
Yeah.
your personality to express yourself. And but there's an unconscious flow to that, and so like the thing is like, when you're unconsciously like letting yourself just be and unconsciously allowing that, there's things that happen that wouldn't happen otherwise, as if you were trying, and I think, Bukowski put that on his gravestone for a reason. Don't try. Because like if you're really trying to create something, then you should just like be as much of a vessel to your own conscious as you can be, and that's hard. And it's getting increasingly harder in this time we live in. So man, I mean, I love doing podcasts, and the podcasts are when you're just hanging and talking, those are the best ones.
Yeah, I mean, you see it happen in almost every episode, or at least I do. I can tell, like when you're listening back, I'm like, oh, right here is where they forgot.
Yep.
That's right where they forgot that they're on a mic and we're doing a podcast, and now it's just a phone call, and now it's real. And it takes people spend.
Yep.
People spend money and go to ashrams and go to all these places to try to achieve that level of forgetting that you're there, and like removing yourself. And there's not a lot of people who can like switch it. Almost no one probably that can switch to like, now I'm not there anymore, and this is just a vessel for my creativity.
There's a lot to unpack with that statement. Yeah, it's like, well, when you say yourself, like what part of yourself is one thing I would ask. And then it's also like
The ego.
yeah, and like the ego. Yeah, so like the conscious like radar system of attention. Yeah, for sure. But you need to have that on this planet as well. Just evolutionarily speaking, otherwise, you would die pretty fast. And then it's like the whole thing of turning it of switching on, switching off. That's a nice duality. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that's part of the wiring of our brains to like be able to do that instantaneously, but there's definitely like a process that that deserves reverence and organization and persistence that could help you get to a state to where there is that quote flow unquote of some kind, and we do that a lot before shows. The band and I have our own approach that we use for that, and I personally have my own approach that I use for that. Because there's a lot of gold. That's where all the seems that seems to be where all the enduring content that springs forth from one's personality and soul can come from, is when you're in that flow state of just letting whatever the unconscious has to say come into the inbox.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of people who want to make stuff, or maybe are even just getting started making stuff, are like, and now I'll be me. Now here comes me. Right. And it takes so much time and effort and practice and failing and, loss of your fear or like embracing your fear, whatever it is. It's so hard it's discouraging off the start, because you just can't, there's just no way to just get to that place
It's
when you're
hard.
starting to
Yeah.
make stuff.
I like integrating things. That's the way I like to, that's the way, at least for my personality, I've been able to find a lot of progress and results that satiate me even after they've happened, is integrating. I don't like, personally for me, I don't find a lot of efficiency when it comes to the narrative of killing the ego, having no fear. These are really absolute statements that rest on one side of the balance. So if anybody's just listening and they're not watching, you have a balance like Lady Justice does. And it's like there's a right hand and there's a left hand. And, you're never going to get in this domain of time and space, you're not going to really get to one side of the equilibrium. And so it's like, it makes sense to try to balance yourself in a place that's in the middle, of integrating your ego and integrating your fears, because there's value to be had in those things. I really don't, I personally don't have a lot of reverberation with the concepts of killing your ego or having no fear. Yeah, it's kind of a good luck. Yeah, good luck, man.
And that's like that's like will. when like you doing it yourself and sheer like you can't do that. You might as well marry yourself to your fear, or like become cozy with it, or see what happens if you follow it. Like when with the comedy stuff that I do, a lot of the stuff I got started doing was all improv on stage with other people. It's just it wasn't stand up. It was like trying to create scenes and shows and do that sort of a thing, and that worked for me because the fear was like a little stoker poker, that ended up bringing more of me out than my preparation did, it in stand up and all of that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I kind of need the fear, I feel like, to bring out the best of, put my back against the wall type of a thing,
Yeah, yeah. Put your back against the wall is a great way to put it. And one of the things with stand up that I find interesting is the yes and necessity to it. One of my friends, Charles Eston, he's an actor. Charles did The Office and he did the show Nashville. And for a few years I would go and sit in with his band and the band that was backing the stars from the show Nashville. This was a fictional series that was depicting certain archetypes that might be found within the ecosystem of what Nashville is, artistically speaking. So it's like, the deranged addict country star, the wise old writer, the young, naive, gorgeous blonde superstar, who has a shadow that she can't integrate or something. And Charles, he got his start by doing stand up, and he's brilliant he does at improv comedy, and he was brilliant at improvisation. It was like, even backstage, he was always going into these fictional places, and he would invite you in. And he told me about Yes And when I was, I think, 19 or 20 years old, and I realized that that's what I'd been doing all the time. I've been playing guitar, and I love that concept, because the thing that's installed, functionally with Yes And is faith. Is you have a belief of something that hasn't happened yet, and you're setting yourself up to allow whatever needs to happen, and it's often you get results that are just really memorable and real.
Yeah, and it's so hard to not invent and let your insert your smart guy comedy brain when you're on stage and think of things like, oh, this could be funny or this could be funny, but really you're just meant to respond to the last thing. You're just meant to truthfully, honestly, earnestly respond to the last thing, and it's so funny when the flip switch happens for people where they'll almost get a laugh and they'll be like, oh, I just was responding to the last thing. I wasn't trying to be funny. And
Yeah.
it's in the honest responses where you get. That's what we were taught when we were in Chicago, is all the, honesty stuff and real stuff and actual conversation is so much better than whatever little joke you came up with in your head, or
I know.
that thing.
That's the thing I feel when I read Bob Dylan's lyrics, is he's like, because there's this dichotomy of thinking versus feeling, right? Like intellectualizing versus intuitive response, intellectual response versus intuitive response, something like that, something approximating that. It seems that the content that always reverberates with me is the stuff that was more intuitive as opposed to the intellectualizing stuff. And, as a player and as a writer, I have to be really careful of that, because my intellect is really managerial for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I could use it as an armor, as a fear response, as kind of as a flight. I can kind of remove myself from the situation by intellectualizing a version of myself into reality, as opposed to intuitively allowing a real honest self to emerge. I'll intellectualize one into existence that is kind of just a character of who I am. And the results I get from that guy are very rarely what I find to be enduring, and I see it, especially within my lyrics, So, man, yeah, I think, what is it Bruce Lee said? Once you see the way, you see it in all things.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I mean, people, we're in Chicago, kind of make fun of the culty nature of how improv was, because you're getting taught these like deep, life lessons that you're now applying there, and they're telling you like apply it to your life, apply it to every day. You'll see, yes, and yourself in your day-to-day life. And some people are hearing that and they're like, all right, okay, we're in cult territory now. It's truly, I mean, I truly use it for every little part of my life, and there's stuff that pops up where it's just like, well, that's what's meant to be, I guess. Let's take that and run with it.
Yes. I
And I can
cannot
be a
agree
little,
enough.
like you said, I can be a little directorial, like my director brain, I can see what I want to happen, but when we're doing the improv stuff on stage, when we're doing these live shows, you got to shut that off and just let what happens. Man, excellent. Excellent conversation starter here, man. I'm so happy to have you on.
Yeah.
And you were so kind. You reached out and you said that you had listened to episodes, and that meant a lot, man. I think you're so talented. I'm such a fan of yours.
That's really kind. Thank you. I specifically found a lot of resonance with my with your conversation with my friend Brian Murray.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
cool.
Brian. I think Brian is one of the greatest musicians that is playing on the scene right now, and his imagination is just brilliant. Every time I talk to him, the ideas in music that he's listening to and the ideas that he's having come to him are really unique to him. And I just love what he does. And I've been waiting for a podcast for him to come about, because the second I met him, I was like, that guy has something to say,
Oh yeah.
and, and people should listen who like, if you like what he does, and you did a great job, man. So yeah, I reached out, and, and you're also friends with RJ,
Yeah,
RJB. Yep. Who's a
of
dear
course.
brother of mine, so.
Yeah, I mean, Brian in particular, I was just excited that same thing. I mean, had seen him play live, and I love Dogs in the Pile and love what they're doing. But yeah, I was really like blown away by his just the way he thinks about things and the way he talks about his music. And he's such a young dude, It's just that he's just getting started. He's so salty already,
Yeah, he is pretty salty. Yeah, it's like that band is really, I think they're a fantastic band, and I forget
Yeah,
how young, I forget that they're all in like their early 20s. Is that right?
yeah, that's right.
Something like that.
I
They're
was
like,
just, yeah, I was pretty blown away by him.
it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're great, man. I love them.
Well, you've done a lot of great shows. You played a lot of great shows this year. And I'm excited to, maybe reference those a little bit, but we're going to talk about the shows that you've seen today. Some of the concerts that you've gone to witness. And so, before we get into your best show and all that other stuff, what's the first live music do you remember seeing, or concert that you went to?
Well, the first time I ever saw somebody play outside of my house, because my dad played guitar,
Right.
was a fellow named Steve Krenz. And I was in second grade when we moved to Nashville from New Jersey. And I remember the first day that we went back into school, because we moved to Nashville on Christmas Eve when I was 7 or 8 years old. And in the first day of school, going back in from winter break, I started at this new school in Tennessee, and there was a fellow named Steve Krenz who came in and played guitar for the class. And I remember being really enamored with it. And it was a concert. Like he played all these great Christmas songs in this Chet Atkins fingerstyle Merle Travis arrangement. And it was really moving to me. And it really caught my imagination. And I had no idea or any interest of ever playing a guitar. There's nothing that it wasn't speaking to me in the sense of I had to make that noise come from my own being yet. And then what had happened a few years later when I was 12, my dad and my cousins and my aunt, they were visiting in from New Jersey, and we went to a bar called Robert's Western World to watch, just to see what was going down on Broadway. And I remember we stumbled upon a band called the Don Kelly Band, and that concert, when I think I was 12 or 13, I think I was 12. it moved me. There was something about it that really, really touched my soul. And it was old time honky tonk music. It was Western swing. It was outlaw country, and it was like bluegrass, all put to this like rockabilly style band with like an upright bass, an electric
Mm,
guitar, and drums. And there was something about it in acoustic guitar that was it was just so it was essentially the same band that Elvis would have had
right.
when he started touring, or Johnny Cash, the old Sun Record sound. And it was like it was just in the time of when string bands met drums and met modern recording technologies for the 50s. So you needed
Yeah.
to have drums, but you still needed to have acoustic personification
Mhm.
of melodies and stuff. And so that sound, now that I'm older, I realize it was perfect for me because it sits in between modern and traditional values, which is kind of even me as a person, I resonate with those. And then also when it comes to music, that's how I hear a lot of things. It's kind of existing in the domains of the past, the present, and the future, you know. And so, with Cosmic Country, like we don't use a lot of synthesizers, or we don't play with we don't do a lot of samples, or anything that is and we might one day, but we try to almost intentionally limit ourselves, kind of like
Yeah.
how Jack White does, um using older tools and older sounds, because that allows you to kind of exist in the past in a way. And if you can exist in the past, that means you have a history, and if you don't have a history, then you did surely have no idea where you're going. And the
Mhm.
reality is you never really have an idea of where you're going. So it makes sense to have somewhat of a history in a lineage, so you can at least try to see where those patterns compounded into, and that could project where your future patterns might compound into. And so, I wasn't thinking about all this shit when I was 12, but it unconsciously was alive in me. And I'll always remember that experience. It was a really hot day in Tennessee in the summer, and the honky tonk was just packed. It's like a 350 capacity room, and it was just packed, line out the door. And there was just this amazing band playing extremely loud. And the thing that happened, it was like you kind of feel it when you see really good bands play. There's a feeling that happens when everybody's imagination and conscious radar is locked in on the band, everybody in the room.
Yeah.
And there's this powerful silence. There's a powerful silence of listening. Everybody is hanging on the next word or the next note. Happens with comedians. When I saw Dave Chappelle in DC, it was the same thing. Like I'm very sensitive to that feeling, and I can tell when it's happening in in varying levels of seriousness and participation. And the greatest bands and performers and minds or personalities that can get behind a microphone or on a platform of any kind, they have this ability to bring everybody's imagination into one collective jellyfish thing. And I love that. That's what I live for, that for those brief moments. So I think that was the first show I remember seeing.
Those moments are when you're first starting to do comedy, you're hearing silence on stage, terrifying, especially if you've gotten laughs a little bit. Like, let's say, you did a couple shows and they did really well, and you're like, I got it. And then, you know, that's the experienced comedian that's like, good. They're quiet, and I got them. And they know the pop is going to come. They know a big laugh is going to come. But when you're getting started, you're like, oh, they're quiet. It's quiet in here. And that's what you want. You want that listening. You want that, you know, engagement, and you want people looking at you. You want people engaged. It's not scary. It's great.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really that's a very enduring principle that you just brought to light in this conversation, because that is a value that I learned really early on because of how I was brought up into music and who my mentors were and who I was playing music with were. That's not a very natural idea to arrive at as a young person.
Mm-mm.
The kind of reflexive expectation that a young person might receive is, or might stumble upon and hope to achieve, is that every song and every moment is hands up in the air. Yeah, glow stick, somebody's passing out. on the rail.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's actually not that. You need to be more calculated with your acmes or apexes of moments, just like a movie. Like there's a reason why when you watch Django, Tarantino saved it all for the end. You know, he gave it to you. He gave you moments like leading up to it, but the last 30 minutes of that movie are just total. You know, it might as well be Tweezer reprise. You know,
Right.
like functionally speaking,
for the whole end of the movie. Yeah.
yeah, you know, and it's like, well, there's something about timing those things out, and you need the negative space to contrast the space that has whatever would be the converse to negative space. I don't want to call it positive space because I don't know what that is, but filled space maybe.
Old space.
You know?
Yeah, really.
And you need that, man. You really do. And that requires faith. That requires a belief in yourself and a belief in the moment and a belief of what is to come. And that's advanced, man. That's all in terms of heading into 2024, that's something that I really am focusing on with our show is not every song needs to be that song.
Exactly.
That moment. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have an ebb and flow because that's what a show is. That's you got to have some sort of again, don't want to say like peaks and valleys because it's not like the negative space is a dip. It's and sometimes people when they review shows, like we had a little dip in the show here. It's like, oh, this was necessary for the big thing that you described later. This was necessary
exactly.
so you could have your big, friggin' white light, whatever peaking thing,
Exactly. Because everyone knows it's coming. I mean, everyone wants it, and everybody loves that moment, and that's going to be when they take their slide of photos and post it online. That white light moment, of course, will be the first one. Yeah, but it's like you need those other moments, and I would challenge anybody to show me an enduring story, or a show which is a story, or a set of comedy which is a story on some level. Show me an enduring one that doesn't have those because you probably won't. That's the thing. And that's hard though. It's not easy.
It's very hard. Jerry Seinfeld describes it as not everything he does is perfect, but he describes it as you've got a bunch of little knives in your suit. And sometimes comedians will abandon their whole set if it's not going well to start off. And I'm going to do this whole different thing, but you've got all these little weapons on you and you're going to pull them out later. No one can see them. You've got them all hidden, tucked away. No one can see them. They're there, so just wait until it's time to throw the next one because you got them all. You've got everything you need. You've got everything going on.
Serenity now.
Yeah, man. Pretty cool stuff. Do you have like that's a lovely first musical experience. Do you have a worst? Do you have a worst like a show that you went and saw that was like, I don't know. You don't have to, rag on any artist either if you don't want to.
I've seen a lot of shows that I felt were probably very uncomfortable for the people making it.
Yeah.
And
good way to put it.
Yeah, I would say there was one show where collectively the entire room was unsettled, and that was when I was opening for a country artist back in 2017, and somebody pulled a gun out on the person who was doing tickets at the box office during the show. And that was everybody, that was a very bad experience.
That sounds like old West, like we're in a saloon.
Sounds like it sounds like a Clint Eastwood movie or something. It was, I think it was in Alabama. But, I love Alabama. And, not to get into anything political, but I would say that because I just have a lot of friends from Alabama and I have a lot of country artists that I love that are from there. But, so that was a moment where the show was kind of bad because you go home from the show unsettled. Because you're almost like the fear response, like on a Darwinian level, your cortisol is still going and you're like, you don't feel like you're fully safe because there was a snake in the garden, metaphorically speaking. But I honestly to say, I've never seen a show even despite how uncomfortable it was for the performers, and I can name a bunch of them, but people that we would know and love on this podcast, where I knew they were uncomfortable and it wasn't happening for them. But out in the audience, it was never a bad enough experience on the personal level of the producer of the experience for the audience to where the spirit of truth didn't compensate and allow for it to be a great show for everybody who was watching. I mean, I
Yeah.
honestly I really honestly haven't. And I would like for that to be something that, because I'm very critical. Like, I think, I do a lot of work to be very reflective and very critical, just so I don't have to be unconsciously negative. If I can bring
Yeah.
everything to light, then I logically will arrive at a positive state of being and proceeding forward. But with that said, I'm very critical and I have a very high expectation and like almost a coach-like belief when I go and see bands and artists or comedians or anybody speak or do anything. I want it for them to be a transcendent experience so bad that I'll be critical, And I've never really seen a show outside from somebody pulling a gun on the box office employee that actually was, a bad show. So,
Good things a little bit. That's
yeah.
a
I
good
mean,
way to put being.
I saw a show last week that was not good. I arrived
Yeah.
at the venue and the person told me, they were like, there's no one here. And, and I was like, listen, it doesn't matter, and it's like, and it was a great show, for me watching it.
Yeah.
And I asked them how it was after and they hated it, and it was like, well, to me, it was good, so yeah.
That's a good way of putting critical too, that you wanted it so bad for the artist that you were critical. Because I'll go see, like my younger brother, incredibly funny guy, super funny guy. Didn't go through comedy graduate school at Second City like I did, and so isn't watching comedy with the same eye. And then we'll see someone or watch a show, and I'm like, that is, I don't know what I'm getting out of that. And then he's like, oh, Mr. Mr. Comedy knows everything about it. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm not, saying that I'm better or that or that this is, below standards of some kind. It's like, I know how great that can feel, and how great something can be, and you want every single time an artist takes the stage to be this, experience for them and the audience and everyone who was involved. And yeah, he wants someone to be like kind of swept away, every time.
Yeah, I'm kind of simultaneously like Phil Jackson and also somebody watching Michael Jordan play, because it's like, when I go and see a show, because when I watch a band play that I'm friends with, like, I'm watching everything. I'm watching the drummer did a fill out of the bridge into the last chorus and the bass player looked at him because he didn't quite land it. I'm watching all the things. And anybody, if I ever come see your show, I can guarantee you I have a good idea of what you guys are talking about in the green room after the set. If you guys talk about your show.
Right.
That shit honestly doesn't matter. And it's like, what is it? It's Latin or Greek. It's vox populi, vox dei, which is the voice of the people is the voice of God. And most of the time, anytime I've ever had a bad show, the people in the audience don't catch on to the variables that I would denote as to make it bad, So
Almost never. Yeah.
now with comedians, though, you stand a very great risk of the audience hating you, because you actually have to state ideas that are not abstract, really. Like with songs, I can make a statement that would be really abstract, poking at somebody's perhaps ideology or religious experience that they might not like if I were to be literal about it.
Oh, right.
And I've seen people like hate comedians and walk out on them, like, fuck this guy. And it's like, well, that you run a greater risk, I think,
The walkout thing is so funny, but when you're doing comedy, you're speaking the same language as the audience. We're talking, and what you would like to be said, or how it feels if someone's awkward or something like that. When you're playing music, even just in the lyrics, that's a language that we're not necessarily speaking on. And in the music, almost no one in the room can speak that language. Maybe there are people who are great musicians in the room and things like that, but the language within your band, like, we don't speak it. We don't know what's going on. And so there's a lot missed, in the audience. In a comedy audience, they They don't miss much. They know.
They don't miss much. That's the thing. That's the, yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah. It is difficult to pick a best show that you ever went to. Do you have any like honorable mentions that are not the best show, but you'd be remiss if you didn't bring them up?
Oh man, I mean, every time I saw the Don Kelly band play, that was an amazing experience for me. I mean, truly every time. I that was one of the best bands I'd ever seen play, and that was at Robert's Western World. And when J.D. Simo was playing guitar with them, and Dave Rowe was on bass, or Joe Thick on bass, and Artie Olinikoff on drums, and Don Kelly fronting it, that was one of the best bands anybody could ever go and see. And if you're a fan of improvised music and good songs, anybody would have loved this band. And so I would say, they always put on an exceptional show that really was trying to transcend their environment. And I remember the moment that Fish really clicked for me. It was, I think it was Birds of a Feather into Character Zero, like into Bathtub Gin, in something of that order, at Ascend Amphitheater in 2021, in August. That moment for me was something happened in my psyche to where I finally got into the boxcar on the train and I was a passenger. That moment for me was really transcendent. I really, really fell in love. And I haven't had a lot of moments in my life where I can kind of receive a vision of how to proceed for the next couple decades and get values from a vision in terms of how to organize my life and approach trips of life in playing, but that was one of them. The first time I played on stage was one of them. Playing with Widespread and seeing them play at Daniel Island this year in May 6th, that was one of the best shows I've seen. That was like I'm very keen, or I'm very reluctant to call anything revelatory because I'm not entirely sure, but something that's more insightful. That and that Fish show really did something to me. There was something that was just because the audience really wasn't giving it to him that night, and I could tell Trey was really not backing down from that.
Yeah.
Like he really was like, he was going to get it out of us. He wasn't going to stop. Like his life depended on it and he was going to make it happen. And he did one of those things where he, like he says, more preparation than you see and more abandon than you could ever believe. He did, that's one of his greatest quotes. And he did that. And I couldn't believe it. Like this guy had thousands of people on the train with him and he just did a U-turn out of nowhere. He didn't even blow the horn. He just did it,
Yeah.
And it was just like, my God, the faith and the imagination he was serving what was coming to him with such bravery that he didn't care how obtuse the angular change was, geometrically speaking, to what was going on musically. He just, it was, I couldn't believe it. And then it was this thing of where everyone was like, what did he just do? And then I think it was Bathtub Gin. And then, my God, it was just, that was insane to me. I just couldn't comprehend how somebody could do that. And with such grace too, at the same time. And, also Paul Cawthon, this was me playing with Paul. I remember Paul. So Paul, if anybody's not a fan of Paul or doesn't know him yet, you ought to, because he is the truth. He's a songwriter from Texas, and I guess you could call him country, but he's just his own genre. And I was on tour with him back when he put out his first solo record. And he was still playing small rooms at the time. He was playing 250, 300 cap rooms. He played like Globe Hall in Denver or something, small place. And I remember this was one of the best moments in music I've ever seen in my life. and Paul hired me to be in his band because I was developing a reputation as kind of this gunslinging, shredding guitar player. And he's a great entertainer. He knows how to put together a band, kind of like Elvis did with James Burton back in the Vegas days. And we were playing this room to maybe like 30 people. And I think it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday. And Beachland Ballroom in Ohio somewhere, I think Cleveland. And I remember Paul we played a song. It was this big, like Clint Eastwood movie style Western song with all these vocals and crescendos and big moments, and no one really clapped after we finished it. And I remember it pissed Paul off. I remember it made him mad because he just gave it all to him and they didn't really care. And I remember Paul, he turned to me and he kind of turns his head and lifts it up. He's like, and then he like lifts it up real fast to the right and he goes, "Put it down, gunslinger. I'm going to need to work on this one on my own." What the fuck are you talking about? And he looks to the rest of it. He's like, "Y'all go grab a Budweiser." I was like, okay. So, we take a break. And Paul breaks out the acoustic. He had like an LG, I think he had LGO Gibson. And he went into this, what's the song? I can't remember it. And he broke the windows with his voice.
Oh.
Yeah. He broke the window. I saw it happen. And there were these two girls, really cute girls that were sitting at the bar, and they started crying. Like moments, like right, like the first verse, he started, and they started crying. And I remember seeing, like, I never so intimately had seen somebody with just their voice and their guitar like make people like physically break down. And then towards the end of the song, he went into this big operatic Pavarotti moment because he's a huge guy. He's like 6'4", 6'5". And he's just built, he has a huge diaphragm and he can just move a bunch of air, just like any great big male singer or female singer could. You're just built different, and, it's not all sly like Sand or something where it's like, or in like, Tube or something where it's like, it's like, this is somebody moving tons of cosmic force with air physically from their huge body. And, he broke the windows. And I remember it was crazy. Then he ended the show. Like 15 minutes early after that song. We were contracted to do a 90-minute show and he did 75. And the owner of the venue came into our green room after, and Paul's smoking a cigarette inside the green room. And the guy's like, "You ended early, and how are you going to fix my mirrors?" And Paul goes, "I just handle it with my tour manager." And then just like walked out. He went and talked to these girls. And I think, it was like, just the most rock star outlaw thing I've ever seen, really. Just so not who I am, because I'm just like a nerdy, like neurotic person. So like, that's not how I would like ever handle my extroversion as a personality, but that's how he did. And I remember seeing the whole thing felt like a movie to me. And that was one of the best moments that I, forever will remember, and internally grateful to have been there because it was such a vulnerable moment for him. And unfortunately, the gravity of the truth has sophisticated Paul's environment enough now to where he has thousands of people come to a show in any city he goes to in the country, as he should be. But check him out if you haven't, because I'll never forget that moment. It was just seeing a human summon the truth against all odds and just defeating the room,
that again sounds like a story that you'd hear like when people are trying to tell you how great Howlin' Wolf was. And they're like, actually, he blew out the windows and the whatever. And you're like, all right, probably didn't happen, but he was really good. And so thank you for overdoing it with your story there. But I'm sure, there's no way he blew the windows out. You're like, this is, again, now like in our times, you were there. Like, that's crazy. Craziness.
It's kind of the archetype of John Henry, which is kind of the modern performers, probably their most compelling dilemma that we all have to face today is the big machine of industrialization that once manifested in John Henry as in a different form. The big machine of industrialization that the modern performer or creative has to encounter today is social media and all the fruits from the deficit of attention span or consideration span. And you have to be better and more compelling in the modern moment. You have to push more steam and lay down more track than these machines that we're carrying around have to that can put out. So it's like, how are you going to be more compelling than news or Instagram or TikTok or something? Because anybody at any moment during your show could whip that out and not care. They can go to the bathroom, and that was, I saw Paul beat the machine with just his muscle and faith. And it was just
Yeah.
a brilliant moment, man. I mean, and that's something they don't teach you in music college, which I never went to. You don't get to experience actually seeing a human summon the cosmic celestial assistance that is to their advantage to actually create a transcendent moment with people. And that's what it's all about, So,
Yeah. And just tremendous faith in yourself to be like, all right, guys, take a break here. I'm going to do this. No problem.
yeah,
And
we
also,
did it.
and also, what are you supposed to do after the window crack thing? It's like, all right, and now a little number here. No, you're done after the window crack. He's right.
All he said, like everyone stood up, like even the bartenders were like clapping. He goes, "My name is Paul Coffin. Thank you very much," and then left the stage. Like, come on, man. Like, I am. Like that was.
Oh,
I think about that moment a lot. I really do. I think about it at least a couple of times a month. I think about that because I'll never forget standing side stage and seeing the mirror break. I just couldn't
yeah.
believe that you can actually do that. But he went into this note because he had this voice. He'd be like, "No, starting down here," and then he did this
Yeah.
big swell of air, and I think it was on the word "eyes" or "you." It might have been "you," and he went "you," and he went all the way to here.
Oh,
And I just, I couldn't believe what I just saw. It was just this theatrical truth, So that's my spiel on Paul Coffin. Also, I remember I saw both Billy Strings and Chris Stapleton and Sturgill Simpson play at this venue called the Five Spot. Not on the same night, different nights, different years. And I remember seeing them before they really had any zeitgeist asset of attention.
yeah.
And I remember being really moved by those guys for all different reasons, like almost to the point of tears. I remember one show that's ever one of the only shows that's ever broken me down into tears was Sturgill Simpson, Halloween 2015 at the Ryman, first row balcony seats. So like dead center, right in the middle of the stereo image of the sound. And this guy's whole life of hardship and bullshit jobs was coming to an end, and he was finally able to getting to amplify his soul. And he sold out, I think, 2 or 3 nights at the Ryman, and he just had something to say, man. And it was Jesus Christ. That whole show brought me to tears. So yeah, I get really passionate about these moments, so I might improvise a little while. So we could probably move on to the next question.
No, please. I mean, because that's what it invokes in me too, man. I mean, it's just I also just get way, especially when I'm at one of these shows, and I've seen Trey do it, I've seen Billy Strings do it. That Billy Strings show that I saw was a little more the opposite of what you were talking about. Immediately in the zeitgeist, people were going bananas from the beginning of the show because he was there, type of a thing.
Yeah, well,
But like,
that's
yeah,
cool too.
it's super cool. And he even took a moment in that show to be like, this venue is a venue we didn't sell out last year, and now it was very difficult to get tickets, and that's the coolest. And he's also having those moments. But I mean, yeah, when you're there and you're feeling what's going on for this artist, or you're feeling what's going on for the members of each individual in the band, or you watch someone take a solo that is new to the band, and you're watching them become their own within this unit or something. Yeah, I read so far into these moments too, and take all the own inspiration that I can. All the little stories that I'm telling myself in my head during the show is like going back into what I do and stuff. But is there a best show you ever saw, number one ever type show that was transformative for you in some way, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was I constantly try to integrate the feast over famine narrative into my internal dialogue. So I have a lot of shows that I love, as opposed to like perhaps just one.
Yeah.
Because I think logically that's kind of just how it is. Because every person, I remember like Dave Chappelle in DC when he was filming those 2 Netflix specials. Like those were insane for me. Like I just couldn't. that was transformative for me, of just like, your life is short and you have to say what you think is real. But so there was one show though that was immensely transformative for me that happened when I was 14, and that's when I went and saw the Don Kelly band. So when I was 14, it was about 2 years into me getting really serious about guitar, and I really was identifying. It was just really spiritual for me, and it was a really good thing for me to do. And my dad saw that, and he had this idea that I should go down and busk on the street and try to make some money doing this. And I think it was like might have been a Wednesday or a Thursday. And we went down on the street and I made no money. And I was really disheartened. And we were walking past a bar called Legends Corner. And in the 2 seconds that it takes a person to walk past an open door, the people who were playing on stage at that time saw me playing, called me out on the microphone, and invited me to come play up on stage. And that was the first time I ever played on stage. And it was this insightful moment of my life that kind of gave me this vision of, keep doing this. This is where you need to work, Daniel. And so my dad and I went down the next day after that, and I made over $500 that day. And it made me enough. It made me enough money to buy a Telecaster, like the one I'm holding, but not this exact one. And when I was done busking for the day, we went into this honky tonk called Robert's Western World, and there was a band called the Don Kelly Band that was playing, and it all clicked for me once they started playing. It was like, oh, this was the band that I saw 2 years ago. Oh, no way! How crazy is that? And I remember that to close their third set, because they did 4 sets a night, they closed with the song "Ghost Riders in the Sky." And Ghost Riders is kind of like this really dark, old Western, it's like really sinister. And I remember, and this was all happening 15, 20 feet away from me, because there was nobody in the room really. It was like an off day of the week. And I remember JD was playing guitar in the band at that time, and he took, and they had this big A minor vamp that they would just go on for however long it needed to be. And JD ended the solo with like him playing behind his head and like playing with his teeth and doing all these like altered scales. And it was just really emotionally like a lot for me to process. And I remember I was in tears, and I was 14 after he played that, I was in tears. And he came down from the stage because they took a set break after that. He talked to me, and he said, "Hey, my name's JD. What's your name?" And, he introduced himself to my dad, Sam. And I think he was trying to calm me down, because I was like overreacting to this moment, because it was so much. And he said to me to always play with soul and to learn everything by ear. That's how we ended the conversation. And I took his advice. And then after that show, I was kind of off to the races. And that show was immensely informative for me, and sculpting in terms of what I wanted to do, what kind of music I wanted to do, and how I wanted to do it. Yeah. So that show, specifically, that was one of them.
Yeah, I mean, when you have someone that you admire kind of give you any sort of advice whatsoever, it's massively impactful. But that particularly, it feels like, in what you do and what this scene does improvisationally, all you have is your listening and your ear and your skill and your talent and everything that you've worked on up until this point. But like it's all about hearing and listening. And so what a cool first step for him to be like, that's what's important. How you listen to yourself, how you listen to music, how you listen to the band, and how you learn this stuff is like, it's got to be coming from you, not from a book or a school. Or of course you can hone your craft that way. Of course you can get really sharp that way and learn technique that way, but you are listening and you are playing. So it's up to you.
Exactly, my friend. I really think experience is one of the greatest bestowals that we as humans are are gifted, and it's so common because everybody you meet in your life has an experience with their personality, and you're born with a personality, just like you're born with a certain eye color, and it's kind of outside of your volitional free will's bandwidth of operation, and so you have almost this personality that to some degree never began because you were born this way. So, which is weird. And then you have experience that by de facto begins and ends. So you have a variable that is eternal and not circular, that just is an absolute. And then you have these kind of supreme experiential episodes of life where you're experiencing things, but you're taking it all in through your personality and through you with a capital Y. And that's something, and that's like, that is as far as I can water all of this life that I've had so far down to, is that experience is one of the greatest gifts you could have. And you literally cannot exchange it for anything. You either have had it or you haven't. And that's the thing.
It's exactly the thing. And I think I spent a lot of my late teenage years, early 20s trying to find that. I'm like, I have to go find these experiences. And you can't make it happen. You have to just let them happen. Like you work and dogged persistence and everything. And like, I'm going to put myself in the right position and I'm going to move to this city because that'll put me in the whatever the heck. But like,
those are good too, though, right? Because I was going down, my dad, we would go down to Broadway every Saturday, and I would busk every Saturday, and I would, and any money that I made, I would go and tip the bands with it, and see if I could play a couple songs with them. So like, I think the flesh is fact, as Rodin said, and it's like, I think it's, you got to honor the fact that, like, even when Woody Allen and David Lynch talk about this, like, you got to show up. Stephen Pressfield especially talks about, you just have to show up every day for it. There's no getting, you can't substitute that for anything. But yeah, those big moments of experience, they just happen to you. Yeah,
man. This has been a fantastic conversation, Daniel. It's been great having you on, man.
Thanks.
Truly love talking to you.
My question for you is, this year so far, do you recall a moment at a show that was kind of an apex of transcendence?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What is
absolutely.
it?
Yeah. It's it is a little bit the band, but it is also just the people that we were with.
It always is, isn't it, Cam? It's always your brothers and sisters that are with you. It's always the community.
Yeah.
It
was so nice that Goose played for this moment. But it was just this moment. So, this year has been, we're still in 2023 talking. This will come out in 2024, but this year, 2023 has been so great to be. I love going to see live music. That is my recreation. That's what I do to fill my tank inspirationally. I just love seeing live performance, specifically live music, and I can just be there for it. And this year with all this comedy stuff and just me posting silly little videos about the scene and stuff has allowed me to go see a lot more shows and then also meet a lot of great people. And it, in the way of like speaking things into existence and manifesting moments for yourself and those type of ideas. We were at Goosemas this past month here, and I'm there with Sean, who runs the Long Strange Putt account. I'm there with my girlfriend Jess, who we started dating kind of within the last year and have become very serious in this last year. And I'm kind of in this group of people who are all these new friends that I have, and all these really just driven folks who are, making things happen and fired up for what they're doing, and also just really supportive of each other's stuff. It's this beautiful little community. And so just in this just as I get into my head about that, during the show, and just being like, wow, this is really, how great is that? About 2 months prior, my friend Connor, who he runs an account called The Long Strange Niche, which is making fun of Sean's account. The internet's fun. It's a fun place, but he he's a total goofball. He's a great guy. I love this dude. And he, he tweets out like 2 months ago. He's like, thank you, Bruce Hornsby, for sitting in with Goose over the weekend for, and playing That's the Way It Is. And obviously the internet responds immediately. He's got tour dates and this and blah, 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 blah. That's never going to happen. And actually here's what, kind of breaks down why it's not going to happen. And so we put it out of our mind now. And, Connor is from Hampton. Connor has had a big year for a lot of different reasons. There was maybe a window where he wasn't going to come to this weekend because he has been going through cancer treatment. But he's there for the show, and we have written off this moment completely. And at the show, he's passed out like some like fluorescent orange hats to people, kind of like the one that you're wearing right now. And he's not with us. He's like, a mile away in the stadium. He's so far away. Yeah. And they do this little, alien voice that comes on. It's like, and life form detected, Bruce Hornsby. And it was just like
really good.
I like look across, the whole stadium is looking at the stage and freaking out and pulling their phones out and going nuts and, all that stuff and cheering for Bruce Hornsby. And I look across the stadium and I can see the orange hat that he's got, twirling in the air, and he's faced back looking at us in our section because he knows where we're at. And it was just this like full moment of like, I'm in this group of people that if you talk about something, it's going to happen. And if you work on something, it's going to come true. And if you want something to happen, make it happen. And calling that Bruce Hornsby is going to be there, not a huge deal, but just that whole, it was like this confluence of this whole year of like, cool things happening just because we put it out there. And I started bawling. I just started, weeping uncontrollably. They weren't even playing music at this moment. It's just letting him walk onto the stage and wave and say hi to everyone. And I am just like uncontrollably bawling my eyes out, Yeah. And other people are excited for the moment too. But I just, you spend it sounds like you're this way too. You spend a lot of time like wanting things to be perfect, and you want them to be exactly how you'd like them to be, and you want to release things and make your art exactly how you'd like it to be made. And I didn't plan on being like jam band comedy community guy, but it was a bunch of saying yes. There's a bunch of saying yes to this stuff all year long that has just created cool moments and these great relationships that I have with these excellent people now. And it was just kind of like, thank God you said yes to all that stuff, dude. Like, I mean, thank God you weren't too precious with yourself, or you weren't too cool for this, or you weren't too whatever. Like it was all wrapped up in that moment. And so,
oh, wow. Yeah. Right. So all of a sudden you had this external world reflection that was validating all of this internal world sacrifice and faith that you had been producing. And man, congratulations. Like that's what a concert should be. Like that's what Gooseness probably should have been. You're like an apex personality of like what that show should have been for someone. That's great.
Yeah, it was so great. And there's been great little moments like that throughout the year too, but it felt like it was what you said earlier. You keep pressing the gas on this, Cam. Like this is the right place to be, and you're not doing so bad with this,
What do you think Goose is going to do? Because it's just fair game. None of us know. What do you think they're going to do?
Right.
I've heard they might bring in Adrian from Twiddle. I don't really know.
I don't know for sure. And it is a bummer. I mean, Ben is a great drummer, and
It is.
obviously, in listening to the band, that's who was the drummer when I started listening to him. So that's,
Me
and
too.
he's a great presence on stage. He's an awesome, positive presence on stage, and
As
he's
is
also
everyone else too in
phenomenal.
that band. Yeah, everyone else in the
Ab-
band
ab-
too is phenomenal.
yes, I think they all bring a little something different, but also a little something similar to the band. But I am excited at the possibility of them bringing in someone else who unlocks a new part of what they'd like to accomplish. There's a lot of potential there for that, and I think, I mean, I've got no idea who it's going to
Yeah,
be. I've
I
got,
have no idea.
I've got no idea. Anything I'd say would just be like a regurgitation of something I saw on Twitter. But
Yeah, and no one on Twitter
yeah,
knows. No one knows.
yeah, right. No one's got any idea, but I am excited for the possibility of them unlocking a new part of themselves, or just being able to follow whatever they'd like to follow with this new drummer. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, what a great response. I think that's brilliant. I'm really interested to hear what people would have to say. Like, or I was particularly when you said Goosebumps, I was like, I bet I had that question popped in my head because I wanted to hear. Do you have enough of a logical understanding of being somebody who's on stage and what that means? But you also are such a huge fan, reverentially, of music. So that's a great response. Everybody from Twitter should try to adopt that attitude because that's positive. It's good.
yeah, I mean, the someone who's on stage, making an audience, you know, uh, go crazy, or that moment that you're talking about with Trey, I've seen him do that as well. I've seen him, and he is a guy who is a major source of a lot of my inspiration. Just the way that he carries himself into a show, and the way that he plays with so much joy, and
Yeah.
you can watch him say yes to himself, or yes to Page, or yes to Fishman. He will literally, the huge smile comes on his face, and he's not even looking back at them. He's looking down, or he's looking out at the crowd, and you can hear him say yes to himself in moments. And it's always, it's always a reminder of like, yeah, this is good right now. Follow this for a little bit,
Yeah.
follow this for a little bit, and that we don't have to get back to anything, and you don't have to. There's no rule. And I hear him do it every single show. And to point out like one moment is very difficult.
It is. Yeah.
Super difficult. Yeah. And to point to one show is super difficult. This whole podcast, super dumb idea. Best show ever. So hard to pick.
But that's almost like the genius of it is like, well, obviously there is no best show ever. So like joke's on you, and like, that's great. I think it's great. I think it's brilliant. Yeah. I love this, man. I'm a huge fan, and I'm really honored to improvise with you here today. This was great.
That was my conversation with Daniel Donato, and man, that guy has got a lot going on. He's got a lot going on with what he's making right now, and he puts a lot of thought and a lot of intention into the stuff that he's doing. He's not up there just flipping riffs. Okay, this guy is trying to get you guys something quality, trying to make these moments that we're going to remember forever. And if you've gotten to see him live, I think that some of you guys have seen some of those moments. And so super excited to talk with him and have him on the podcast. It was great getting a chance to speak with him. He just had a birthday like Saturday. So, just cool to get him out there and have a chat with him, and just get a little insight into how he thinks about his stuff. If you guys have enjoyed this, there are other episodes out right now. One of those is with Matt Bush, longtime music manager of many different acts, Allman Brothers, Phil Lesh, Bob Weir. I mean, heavy hitters. His episode is fantastic. If you're a Dead fan, gives great insight into seeing the Grateful Dead. back in the late 80s, early 90s. There's also a bonus episode on the Patreon right now that is up for free on the Patreon. It's with John Barber from the Disco Biscuits. We talk about their new album. We talk about him seeing the Grateful Dead and Fish in the early 90s, and how their sound sort of changed through the 90s. Seeing AI generated Bob Marley. We get into it with John. So if you are a Disco Biscuits fan, or if you're just getting into Disco Biscuits, even if you don't know anything about Disco Biscuits, honestly, that episode is fantastic. So go listen to the John Barber episode on the Patreon. If you've listened here on YouTube, please subscribe. We would really appreciate it. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave us a review. Really helps us out. But until next time, guys, have a great show.